As the last embers of sunset in 1926 sank slowly into the orchards of Beaufresne on the outskirts of Paris, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the ghost of dried pigments. Within a darkroom shrouded by heavy curtains, a silver-haired woman, her eyes half closed, touched an empty frame with withered fingers. She was not waiting for a spark of inspiration. Rather, in this boundless gloom, she was restoring from memory a shimmering streak of azure sea and the rosy flush of an infant's cheek. Though she could no longer perceive the world's light, her heart remained an eternal museum, housing every hue she had fought for across a lifetime. She was Mary Cassatt, the most resilient pioneer among the women of Impressionism, the stranger who tore a rift of light through the suffocating prejudice of the salons. This is a story of how color redeems solitude and how tenacity confronts the encroaching dark. The genesis of Mary Cassatt's life was not painted in submissive pinks, but forged in a clash between Philadelphia's rigid pedigree and her own restless spirit. Born into affluence, she was destined to drift through a life of embroidery and galas. Yet at 16, she issued a staggering proclamation to her kin: she would study art. In those days, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts was as stagnant as a sealed library, where professors permitted women only to copy dull plaster casts. Loathing such lifeless dogmas, she took up her heavy easel and her misunderstood defiance, crossing the Atlantic alone. In the dim, makeshift studios of Paris, she threw herself into a near-pathological study of anatomy and natural light. This obsessive quest for truth became the sole weapon she would later wield against the tide of mainstream aesthetics. If her early travels were born of rebellion, her subsequent rooting in Impressionism was the practical crucible of her intellectual solitude. Fate, in the gamble known as the Salon of the Refused, led her to meet a soul equally aloof, Edgar Degas. With his barbed compliments, Degas pulled Mary into a new universe composed of luminous dots, vibrant planes, and kinetic energy. Throughout the decade of Impressionist exhibitions, Mary refused to portray women as the hollow ornaments of the salon. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the most mundane yet magnificent moments: a mother bathing her child, a woman leaning forward at the theater, a finger tracing the rim of a teacup. This observation was bloodless, yet in an art world dominated by the masculine gaze, it carved out an undeniable island of female perspective. And the art world, the summit of power, is often reflected in the immortality of style. As top collectors began to vie for her canvases, Mary realized she had gained more than just freedom. She had attained a serenity that saw through vanity. She did not indulge in the social whirl, but retreated ever more frequently to her pastels, studying the minimalist lines of ukiyo-e in her dim stone studio. She found that the more she simplified her compositions, the more she could sense the profound power of maternal instinct. In a letter to a friend, she wrote, "I used to think I was pursuing color. Now I find I am merely looking for an embrace where a weary soul can rest." This journey from technique back to emotional essence endowed her with a transparent, merciful melancholy. Mary Cassatt's final days were spent in a solemn silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage. After the 1910s, due to cataracts and diabetes, her once keen eyes were gradually shrouded by a grayish mist. She was forced to lay down the brushes that had accompanied her for half a century, turning instead to her ears to listen to the world and her fingertips to sense the warmth of stone pillars. She understood that after her passing, the vivid mothers and children on her canvases would breathe on her behalf. Yet, she cared more that her will for female independence would spark a flame for those who followed. On a morning in June 1926, Mary peacefully closed her eyes, her hands still clutching a scrap of cloth stained with color. She left no sprawling dynasty, only a legacy of color and tenderness that remains burning and warm a century later. The saga of Mary Cassatt thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading dusk of Paris. We are often accustomed to worshipping the mighty who conquer lands and decree fates, yet we overlook the warrior who mends light and shadow behind an easel. She was never an opportunist seeking fame through art. She was a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. She teaches us that no matter how mundane your life may be, or how deep your solitude, the inner persistence for beauty is your sole and eternal sanctuary. May the serenity and vastness of Mary Cassatt become the softest feather in your dreams, guiding you toward that most tranquil and expansive shore of the inner soul. Good night.